Germany is on lockdown. People are advised to stay home, work from home. Schools and universities are closed. Only supermarkets and drugstores are open. Restaurants can only offer takeout food. Groups of more than 2 people in public will be dispersed by the police unless they can prove that they are members of the same family. I went shopping yesterday. I believe I was the only one wearing a simple face mask in the entire supermarket. Until very recently, prominent public health experts, virologists, etc. have said that face masks offer no protection. Even nurses and doctors, policemen, nursing home staff and other public officials in Germany only have a very limited supply of masks and other protective gear. There is an awkward phenomenon. Face masks that were purchased by the local government of Berlin, where I live, did not reach us. 200,000 masks have just mysteriously vanished at Bangkok airport in Thailand. Another 6 million just mysteriously got lost in Kenya, despite the German military being in charge. So I talked to a local official who was quite desperate about supplies not reaching their hospitals with COVID-19 patients. He said shipments are being confiscated on land routes. So what he did was he wrote a letter of help to the Chinese president, Xi Jinping, and the Chinese embassy here in Berlin has immediately stepped in and offered their help. Unfortunately, there is no overarching general strategy in the European Union. There is actually no unity. There is no general solidarity. Every country has their own approach. Some are very liberal, like Sweden, where cafes and schools are not even closed. Some are even as strict as Wuhan, like the northern Italy region. Nevertheless, hospitals in northern Italy have been totally overwhelmed, and the death toll is so terribly high, as you can read from news accounts, that even morgues cannot cope. I have a friend who lives in the Italian epicenter of the outbreak, and she says, before the current pandemic, tens of thousands of hospital beds were actually shut down. Why? Because after the financial crisis of 2008, institutions of the European Union forced Italy to implement strict budget cuts. So now this is coming back to haunt them. The Italian government recently asked the European Union to send urgently needed supplies and financial aid, but instead borders were initially shut down and the Italians, were left on their own. So the Italians have no trust anymore in the EU leadership. They have become very unpopular. EU flags have been taken down from local buildings in protest. There's also a shortage of doctors and nurses in Italy. Many of them get infected, work long hours, and are showing already symptoms of severe stress. So fortunately, countries like China, Russia, and even Cuba and Albania have sent doctors and experts to support the Italian people. My friend told me that they are very, very grateful and will always remember this generosity. When the Wuhan outbreak happened, the German government did not think it would become a global pandemic. The German Disease Control Center said the risk was low. They have, of course, now upgraded their assessments, but only step by step. The lockdown came quite late, and the alarm was not raised loud enough. The government still has no containment strategy for this virus. 60 to 70% will get infected, they reckon. They only want to slow down the infection rates. They also call it flattening the curve. They only want to prevent the hospitals and the intensive care units to be overrun and protect homes of the elderly. But this is very risky. There are only a few voices now saying that we must have a much tougher stance and enforce much more testing and isolation. Currently, positively tested people who do not need to be hospitalized are sent home for quarantine, not into isolation clinics. I think this is very short-sighted and will not work, because this pandemic will not just vanish as some are wishing for here. and then life will go on as it was before. No, this is the most severe crisis of our age and lifetime. Sadly, there is so much misinformation, even propaganda in the public sphere going around. I'm getting many messages of people who tell me, don't take it so seriously. You are creating too much fear, you're creating panic. And even worse, there is the so-called Cold War faction, people who are blaming China for all that is happening with the pandemic all over the world. These people have to be condemned in the strongest possible terms. I prefer to know about solutions resulting from the experiences and successes of those doctors and nurses who are fighting in the front line against this pandemic. We have to listen to them. I'm getting a lot of messages over WeChat from people asking how the situation is and how am I doing. And to me, this is a sign of compassion, comfort, of empathy, coming from especially friends in China. I'm very grateful for this, and I will continue to follow your advice. Let's get through this together.